Group 1 is comprised of Andrew, Selena, and Tricia, and this week we will be reviewing the Chapter 8 case study, which is regarding the severity of the Equifax security breach. The objectives of the case are to identify the weakness and security in controls of the company, the management, organization, and technology factors that contributed to the problem, to look at the impact of the Equifax hack, and to see how future breaches can be prevented. On September 7, 2017, Equifax announced that it had breached the data of approximately 143 million U.S. consumers. The same announcement stated that some UK and Canadian consumers had been affected as well, but did not give a specific number. The company stated that the unauthorized access occurred from mid-May through July 2017. The hackers did not access the data from Equifax's core consumer credit reporting databases, but from the company's U.S. online dispute portal web application. The data included names, social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, and driver's license numbers. The vulnerability that caused the breach was called Apache Struts. Apache Struts is a popular framework for creating Java web applications maintained by the Apache Software Foundation. The Foundation issued a statement announcing the vulnerability and released a patch on March 7, 2017. The following day, the Department of Homeland Security contacted Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion to notify them of the vulnerability. On March 9, 2017, an internal email notification was sent to Equifax administrators directing them to apply the Apache patch. Equifax's Information Security Department ran scans on March 15th that were meant to identify systems that were vulnerable to the Apache Struts issue, but the scans did not identify the vulnerability. The vulnerability was left unpatched until July 29th, when Equifax's Information Security Department discovered suspicious network traffic associated with its online dispute portal and applied the Apache patch. On July 30th, Equifax observed further suspicious activity and took the web application offline. 3 days later, the company hired cybersecurity firm Mandiant to conduct a forensic investigation of the breach. The investigation revealed that the data of an additional 2.5 million U.S. consumers had been breached, bringing the total number of Americans affected to approximately 145.5 million. What management, organization, and technology factors contributed to the problem? First, there was ineffective identification. The U.S. Computer Emergency Readiness Team in March 2017 issued an alert that all Apache Struts implementations should be immediately patched. Equifax says it circulated this notice to its systems administrators. Equifax has also said that a routine scan conducted a week later, which searched for known vulnerabilities inside its network, had failed to flag the flaw in the Struts implementation that ran its online disputes portal. The second factor was poor detection. Equifax had a security device that allowed it to inspect network traffic, but it wasn't working because a digital certificate it required had expired. The certificate had expired about 10 months before the breach occurred, meaning that encrypted traffic was not being inspected throughout that period. As a result, during that period, the attacker was able to run commands and remove stolen data over an encrypted connection without detection. A third factor that contributed to the problem was no segmentation. Equifax said it had failed to isolate its databases on different network segments. As a result, once the attackers breached Equifax's network, they were able to reach dozens of other databases. The lack of segmentation allowed the attackers to gain access to additional databases containing PII and, in addition to an expired certificate, allowed the attackers to successfully remove large amounts of data without triggering an alarm. There was also poor data governance. Equifax was storing access credentials used by its administrators in an unencrypted format, when proper practice would have been to only store such information in a secure form, preferably with access restricted using multi-factor authentication. The attackers gained access to a database that contained unencrypted credentials for accessing additional databases, such as usernames and passwords. This enabled the intruders to run queries on those additional databases. And finally, there were no query limits. Equifax had no restrictions in place on database queries. As a result, the attacker was able to execute approximately 9,000 such queries, many more than would be needed for normal operations when filtrating the data. Now let's take a look at the impact of the Equifax hack. As with any widespread data breach, those whose personal information was exposed could be at risk for years to come. Although the impact on those consumers is clear, let's take a look at how 1 year later businesses continued to feel the impact of Equifax's breach. First, operational productivity. About half of the adult population in the U.S. found themselves negatively impacted by the Equifax breach. These are the people that make our economy run. When the personal information of your employees is compromised, it can take them an average of 6 months of work to recover from identity theft. That means time out of the office, which doesn't factor in the negative consequences of financial and emotional stress that may hinder their work. Second, there's an impact on business and personal credit. Equifax is one of the 3 main credit reporting agencies managing business credit. Just like personal credit reports are reviewed when applying for mortgages, loans, or credit cards, businesses also have a credit score. A strong credit profile shows vendors and potential investors that the company pays their bills, an indication of fiscal strength and responsibility. This is a critical consideration in the wake of the Equifax data breach, and it can affect more than just the owners of the business. The ability to pay employees, cover overhead expenses, or fill inventory is closely tied to the credit of many small business proprietors, including startups. Cyber criminals and identity criminals can cause a business to cease operations if they destroy the credit score of a business. And finally, there's the corporate investment in cybersecurity. The Equifax breach, along with other high-profile data breaches, has made cybersecurity top of mind for corporations. Cybersecurity Ventures predicts that global cybersecurity spending will exceed $1 trillion by the end of this year. Finally, let's look at how future data breaches can be prevented. First, we can reform the industry by giving consumers control of their credit reports. Credit reporting agencies should provide free monitoring and easy access to credit history. Current laws allow consumers access to free credit reports, but the process is cumbersome and few consumers take advantage. A rationalized market would help ensure that consumers have as much information as possible about the use of their personal data by others. Instead, Equifax and other credit reporting agencies profit from the very problems they create. Second, we should improve breach notification. Congress should set national baseline data breach notification standards to limit the damage caused by data breaches. The federal standards should require immediate and efficient notification of impacted consumers, regulators, and the public. Companies are increasingly interacting with consumers on social media and via automated text and email messages. So it is reasonable to expect that companies can notify consumers within 48 to 72 hours of a breach. We should limit the use of Social Security numbers by private companies. Congress should prohibit the use of the Social Security number in the private sector without explicit legal authorization. They were never meant to be used as an all-purpose identifier. Fourth, we should promote innovative technology to minimize the collection of personal data. There are already initiatives to improve privacy protections in the field of data science, and these efforts could be adopted and further developed by the companies responsible for protecting consumer data. And finally, we can enact baseline privacy legislation and establish a data protection agency. The United States should establish a data protection agency, as has virtually every other advanced economy facing the challenges of the digital age. The current agencies in the U.S. tasked with protecting consumers and citizens lack the authority and even the personnel to do what needs to be done. The United States has fallen behind many other countries that are seeking to ensure that the rapid adoption of new technologies does not leave them vulnerable to data breach, identity theft, and cyber attack. A good starting point would be to enact the Consumer Privacy Bill of Rights, baseline privacy legislation that would put the responsibilities on companies that collect and use personal data to protect the information they choose to collect.